Okay, so we're live. Welcome to Social Media Fridays. Each week we meet to discuss what's happened in the previous week in the world of social media. With us today we have Masataki Wasa from London. Masataki is a Google top contributor on the Google Plus help community on Google Plus, as well as the AdSense forum. He's a TC there as well. And Tony McCreath, the inimitable Tony McCreath, hails from Adelaide. Without Tony, we wouldn't have a Social Media Fridays. Okay.
My fault.
What are we talking about this week, guys?
Well, subject we just brought up before going live was the recent post on should businesses bother doing social, and it was choosing the right social media account for your company. So that could be a good subject. Should businesses go on social, and if they do, where should they be?
It's a problem, isn't it? We have to drag our clients kicking and screaming towards it. Except Tim Capper was. I should invite Tim Capper. Yes, it's hard. And then when they do it, they usually do something lame like post a product or say buy this. And it's not hard, is it? I mean, it's really just a matter of people being willing to be vulnerable and getting out there and exposing themselves for what they are. A term that's been bandied about a little bit this week was authentic. It's easy to be authentic when you don't bullshit. If you just be yourself, nobody can shoot you for being yourself, and that's what social media is all about. Simply social.
Well,
go on.
No, yeah. In a sense, there is an issue, isn't it? Because if you want to be personable, act like a person, interact like a person, then there's always that, not a contradiction, but sort of difficulties in aligning the company, the business, and you as an individual who's responding, doing that job. Some companies do well because they give people actual names when they respond to tweets, for example. So they would say, okay, I am such and responding, on behalf of or from this company. So at least you have, even within the company handle, there will be different people. And you get to know the different people who take to Twitter, and they individually have their personalities, and people get involved in that.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's not always a possible strategy. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, like a lot of companies don't want to do that. They want to restrict how you say things and what you do. But I think people like people, so seeing that personality and being able to distinguish a name and a person and repeatedly see that person, you get attached to them, and that would help a company create that connection with their customers.
And of course there is one situation in which it's really important that you respond quickly, and that's crisis management. If something goes wrong, you want to get in there so you have the ability to not shape, but at least influence the narrative that comes out from that fallout. The problem is if you have a very restricted company policy, you're going to be late in responding. By that time, you don't have that ability to influence the narrative. The narrative is already there, out there, and it's not going to be particularly nice to your company. And for that you cannot really sort of write a manual or write a sort of paper. If this happens, do that, because nature of crisis is such that you are being put on spot, and you have to have someone. If you are going to use social media, you have to be able to respond, and for that you need someone who can do that and someone who can speak in his or her own voice. And that's that's a tough one, because then you have to make sure that you have someone whom you can rely on to do that job.
And who's available 24/7, really, because you never know what time these disasters will happen.
Tell me something. Why do you think it is that so many people who are comfortable and proficient on Twitter have so much difficulty syncing or just merging into Google Plus?
They're very different platforms by the nature of Twitter's only, was it 24 characters or 240, something like that?
140.
140. So the nature, I just went to a social media meetup this week, and they're all very keen on Twitter, and it's all very quick sound bites. They're just saying very quick stuff, maybe linking to something. Whereas Google Plus is you get more in-depth conversation rather than sound bites. So I think a very different nature.
Yeah, if you were to sum it up, would this be true? That on Twitter you talk at people, whereas on Google Plus you talk with people.
I think that's sort of. I'm not 100% sure about that, because I think there is the strong element of broadcasting, isn't it, on Twitter? It's short, but it's to the point, and you in most cases they are public. You're not privately tweeting someone, so it's public. It's out there. It's pushing that content direct. If you are sort of communicating privately through direct messaging, then it's somewhat different. But in the main, I think tweets are public and, in a sense, small pieces of broadcast to the world, as it were. And one thing about Twitter is that it's fast. It's I think if you compare all the different platforms, and if you want to know what's happening now, here and now, then Twitter's probably the platform you head to, because that's where things, when news are broken, as it were.
Yeah, that's definitely an advantage. Like for live blogging and things like that, it's perfect. Someone says something and you've got it tweeted out within seconds of them saying it, the sound bite that they've said. And the other good example is when big events happen throughout the world, it just gets out there so quickly.
And it's a great way of essentially doing a sort of snapshot decision, isn't it? Is this something I'm interested in or not? If for example, if there might be a link in that tweet, and within that 140 character limit, you can make a snap decision, saying, okay, is this something I'm interested in, interested in pursuing further, or reading further, or not? So in that sense, I think it may be an illusion, but I think there's an element of sort of time saving, that you can go through a lot more materials on Twitter than perhaps other platforms.
Yeah, I actually used Twitter like that early on as a way to put all my content with little sound bites, little sentences like the heading of an article, so I could so quickly scan through and decide yes, yes, no, yes, no. And the same thing does go for what you see of other people saying. You can follow a hashtag and just look at the bits of the conversation that are interesting to you, and you can do that pretty quick. There's a lot of comments in one screen.
Yeah, I like hashtags, how they work on Twitter, because it is actually quite a nice way to gauge very unscientifically in the sense that it's not a particularly good way of doing statistics, but if something is happening right now and there's a hashtag, it's a great way to see the sentiment, the people's sentiment on that particular issue, positive, negative, strongly positive, strongly negative, things like that. It's actually it's a handy way of seeing things, and it could be, for example, the television program that you're watching, and many television programs will have their own hashtags, and then you choose that and then look that up, and then you can essentially follow the program with other people who are watching this program and tweeting about it. And that could be quite interesting because you see, oh, okay, so many people think that's interesting, which I didn't, and then the thing that I thought was interesting wasn't picked up by others. So in that kind of situation, Twitter's really interesting. I mean, I'm not an avid tweeter, but I use it quite a lot. I'm a consumer side of things. I don't really use it, but I'm sorry, I don't really use it as actively tweeting about things, but I actually do use it quite often.
To gather data. Yeah, I've just brought up Trends Map. I don't know if you know that, trendsmap.com. And it shows trending regionalised. So, for example, in Adelaide at the moment, Abbott is a common word that people are tweeting about. You can get a lot of information from localized plus the words that words and hashtags people are talking about. There must be some sort of commission going on because that's a big word at the moment. Turbines is popular here, so you can see what's the current conversation, which can be very powerful for a marketing company.
Yeah.
And that's national.
So, what advice do we give clients? How do we encourage them? I mean, it is important, I think, today to be involved in social media. It's a new way of doing business. Well, not necessarily a new way, because there was always the village square, but it's certainly a form of communication which can give a business an enormous advantage. Like, for argument's sake, Michael Dell from Dell Computers, he plays social media very well, I think. He's on personally, as well as he has staff on trawling Google Plus for problems with Dell products.
And does it come down to that he kind of gets it, he's into it, and as a business you really have to have someone in there who does have that drive, the interest and wants to be on there?
It's a matter of leading by example. I think one thing that was really telling with the departure of Vic Gundotra was that Larry Page has, apart from the staged posts at 3:18 a.m. Australian time, Vic Gundotra posted. Larry was the fourth or fifth commenter about 2 minutes later, and then he made a post with his comment, a share of Vic's farewell post. But since then he hasn't said boo about the entire thing. While debate has raged on Google Plus, he said very little, and I think that's telling. I think that I mean, this is the guy that 2 or 3 years ago said Google is Google Plus. and he was telling engineers that they've got to get on board or get out. Now he's saying we're going to build new experiences for our fans. Well, screw you, Larry. We're not fans. We're here because Google Plus works for us, and I don't think he gets that anymore.
Or he's not active enough in Google Plus to understand it that well.
Yeah. There are a few different points there. So let's go back to the first one and come back to the whole Google Plus issue later. The first one that Jim you mentioned was that there are people recognizable as sort of the as the company. I think another example would be Richard Branson for the Virgin Group. He does post, and but that's because the personality is strongly linked to that brand, to the company. If you think about the Virgin Group, you always think, oh yeah, Richard Branson. And I think that I think if a company has that kind of close association with a strong character personality that people have heard about, know about, read about, then I think it becomes easier to pursue that policy, that strategy of posting as the person representing the company, because in many people's mind, the two are essentially the same. That doesn't really work for many companies, and it depends on the size of the business. If it's a single-person operation, then your business is you in a sense. But if it's a very large company, complex being, then it does become a bit difficult. And that's where I think the difficulties are, because there's so many different operations, so many different divisions operating in so many different markets, and you think, okay, right, how do we go about this? And then it becomes tricky.
Yeah, where do you start? Like, say it's a one-man business who is an expert in his stuff. Online, if he's not done anything before, he's a nobody. He's got no authority or trust, and so it's really hard for these guys to start online unless they've been doing it for a while and built up that kind of a community that they're in.
And then there's a question, isn't it? Because people don't have unlimited resources. Resources are usually quite scarce. So you say, okay, right, I'll give it a go. I have a business. I'm one-person operation. I'm going to give it a go. How long should I, experiment before deciding? Because if your social media platform presences don't get traction, in the sense that does it make sense for me to expend my resources, which are quite limited, on things that have not produced any visible results, or even any leads or sales? How long should I give it a go, as it were?
Look, on that note, if social media were an Olympic event, I can direct you guys towards a gold medalist, or at least a gold medalist contender on Google Plus. If you could just do a search on G Plus for Clint Fudge, CLINTFUDGE. Actually, I'll invite Clint Fudge to come and join us.
So, what's his angle?
Well, Clint, he's a specialist tradesman. He does renovation and installation of hardwood flooring, or the highly polished floorboards. He takes a pride in his work, and what he does is he he posts what he's doing. He's not there saying, "Can I sign you up? Like, here's what we charge. Call us on this number." He's simply showing the pride that he takes in his work, and it's amazingly effective. As well as posting the photos of his business, he also posts photos of his wife's business. She's a cake decorator, but he's also active, particularly amongst the group of Australians on Google Plus. And I'll give you an example. Earlier this week, a lady named Catherine, and I'll find that post for you in a moment. Catherine made a post, didn't mention Clint's name, but I know without a doubt she was talking about him. And so she was saying that basically, just what I just said then, Clint posts about what he does. He expresses his pride in his work by showing us, what he's up to this week. Catherine said, not only that, not only does he not force sales on me, but I've also had conversations with him. She didn't mention him by name, but I know I can contact Catherine, and I know that it'll be Clint. But she said, I've had conversations with him, so I'd be more than happy to recommend him to my friends and family. That to me, that's a social media win-win.
Yeah. I definitely think the approach of instead of shouting at people, that you entice them to come in, and so people are more interested in seeing what he's up to than him shouting at them. So I think definitely the right approach there.
Okay, I've invited Catherine as well. I'll find Catherine's post and show you. I won't put that on air, but I'll show you guys. This will take me a couple of minutes if you want to talk over the top of me.
I was just looking at some of his interesting posts, which, even though they're off topic from what he does, it's basically he's being social.
Yeah.
He's being him.
He's being him, and intermixed in it is when he's working, and so he does a work post. So I think it's a great way to get popular and get a bit of brand awareness in there.
Yeah. I think it works for one-person business, or if the owner, him or herself, is posting questions. You wouldn't give that kind of latitude to an employee in a large organization.
No, maybe not some of those videos.
No, I mean, Clint, he does push the envelope. I'll grant you that. He does push it hard, and so you wouldn't let an employee do that. But he is relating to the, I mean, he's not getting any pushback from the people commenting on his stream, is he?
Yeah, he's getting interaction, which is good.
In the comment, I put Catherine's post there.
Yeah, a typical employee has to kind of toe the line a lot more, but they can still create a personality and create connections with their readers effectively. And by not just doing the shouty stuff, but doing the sort of thing he does, like showing off about something good you've just done, or even trying to avoid just trying to sell your products and mix it in, but it's got to be more appropriate when you're an employee. I'm trying to think of an example.
Well, things like posting your photos at work, that seems to be quite popular. People can relate to that. I mean, so someone, the person responsible for social media might take a photograph of his or her office and then post it. Say, look, or go to the staff kitchen and take a photograph of a cake.
Yeah, or events. You got the Christmas party, maybe not that, could get a bit drunk.
No.
But another example I've heard of is like, say you're moving office and you just go through the whole process of moving office. Or even businesses where they start the social media interaction before they even started as a business. Say you're a cafe and it might take weeks before you're open, but you start the social media going by taking pictures of step by step as you're evolving. So by the time you're open, you've actually got a following of people who are interested in what you were doing. And so yeah, being open with that sort of thing can grab people's attention.
Yep.
Just reading the post. Still with that, a lot of businesses, again, they don't have the time, they don't have the inclination, and to keep a social account going. So going back to that article, it basically saying like, well, don't try and get on everything. In fact, try and pick the one where that suits your business, and try and do one thing good rather than lots of things terribly. And I think that's really sound advice. And even going as far as, if you haven't got the time to do one thing good, don't even bother doing that. Wait till you can or need to do it.
True. I noticed this week people were talking about, analysing your previous posts to find out the time of day and the day of the week that gives you the most interaction. And I wonder if that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because what you're looking at is previous posts that worked. And by some chance the signals in that post might have appealed to a particular set of your friends. And it may not have been the time at all that influenced the extra interaction. Well, I forgot where I was going with that. No, I'm totally lost.
So you don't think it's right to have this sort of idea that there's an ideal time to post, an ideal date to post?
I don't think it is. I think you should post. I mean, you don't know what news events are going to happen. You don't know what circumstances are going to transpire to make you want to post. You can't control the triggers that make you post. As Tony said, I've only got two rules, and one is that I don't post crap. I don't waste people. I don't post stuff that just for the sake of posting it. I only post it when I feel passionate about something. And the other thing that I do that I've found useful is that I always try to put a smile on everything that I post, just a little emoticon, because by forcing myself to have that emoticon there, and making sure that it fits, it stops me making a prick of myself, because that's just my natural inclination to be bombastic and rude and belligerent. That's just who I am naturally. But if I can find myself just to post that I can naturally put a smile on, I can sort of live my life without getting into too much trouble.
So you make sure there's a bit of humour in every post?
Well, in other words, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything.
On the timing, at one point I started analysing it, but the problem, like you say, like for me is, at the time I'm writing it is because I'm passionate about it. So you want to send it then. you don't want to kind of say send it in 12 hours when you probably think, oh, I shouldn't have sent that at all by that point. So I tend to just post when I do it, and unless like I don't want to do 10 posts in a row, and maybe if I know my audience is in America, I might time it for that. But generally, I don't worry too much about timing of posts. I think it's going a little too much into it.
Yeah. I notice we have 2 viewers. We've got a Q&A happening here. If you want to, actually, if you want to join us, you're more than welcome. I see Skatista has posted, but I'm sorry, we don't speak Spanish.
It's not Spanish, but I think Portuguese.
Portuguese, sorry.
So I can't interpret it. Something about not understanding anything, I think.
That makes all of us.
How can I say? How can I say? Actually, I'll use Google Translate.
That's what I'm just.
Oh, are you doing it, Masataki? Well, actually, you're the translator. What? I've always wondered what you do in your job, Masataki. You translate to Japanese to and from English and some German, is that right?
Yes, well, I translate from German into Japanese, as well as English to Japanese and Japanese into English. The comment is, "Hi, I am Brazilian," according to Google Translate. So that's quite nice. So we have an.
All right. Well, I'm going to select to answer that question. I'm sorry, I don't know how to drive this, guys, but we're answering this question. How do we place up an answer?
It'd be nice. It's nice to know that we have presumably someone from Brazil watching. It must be early.
Well, we're learning because we don't know how to answer questions. Something happened there. Someone's currently answering.
Is there really?
I don't know.
Jim, don't you have a button that says, it's been answered somewhere?
Yeah, there's a button for questions and answered questions. I was just looking at those. That might have caused what you saw, Tony. But
it's a bit fiddly.
Oh yes, we are demonstrating how incompetent we are in terms of social media.
Well, the key point there is you got to try.
Exactly.
If you're not going to put your social media is about putting yourself out there, and you have to take that risk.
Yeah.
And maybe we're going to be outcasts for the rest of our lives, but. But we'll have to go to MySpace.
Maybe we don't answer this question in text. Maybe we answer it in voice, and then I click done.
All right, showing us answered questions now.
Oh, that's it.
I'm not seeing that.
It took a while, but it's just caught up, there's no.
Okay,
yeah.
Oh, and we lost Jim.
It's probably saying we never said hello. Did you work out Brazilian for hello?
My browser crashed.
No, ouch.
Um,
No, I think I may be wrong, so I'm totally speculating. It might be, even if it's answered, because there's only one question, it's showing up as currently answering.
Mine was currently answering for a while, but now it's come up as answered.
Okay. Then must be some sort of delay, because I see it under answered questions, but it's still up there saying, stating currently answering, and it's the blue background.
Yeah.
White text.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Anyway,
That probably means the last question that we're talking about. Yeah, so.
That would be my guess.
Well, to Skatisto, mate, I'm going to click the done button. If you have a question for us, we'd love to hear it. Anyway, so I've clicked the done button. I'm not sure if it shows up on the event. Does it?
I'm not sure about the event page, but now it's gone from the sort of currently answering. So it's been done. It's done. So.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mine's just changed to ask your audience to submit questions, and they will appear below.
Yeah.
So you should do that, Jim.
Yeah, so it was a done button. That's good. That's good to know.
So now we're ready. Go on, give us the questions.
Now, shall we go back to the big Google Plus question? Because Jim, you have certain ideas, opinions about that.
I've got some very strong opinions. I think the days of Google Plus are numbered. Because think of the amount of engineering required to provide this service, and also take on board the pushback that Google would get if they attempted to monetize this service. Yes, Doc Sheldon will jump in and join us. How lucky are we?
Yeah,
okay.
That's cool.
Just 1 second. I shall click this button. Just got to wait for Google to catch up. There you go, Doc. Your invitation's on its way.
Jim, when you're talking Google Plus, you're talking about just the standalone social network, or everything that it's kind of got itself into, like from YouTube comments to logins, which I've heard the rumor is they're changing the names of logins to just Google now.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, there are things, there are functions that will continue because there's just a compelling business case for them, like Hangouts, for argument's sake. They'll never die, but I can't see them continuing with a method of communication. Hey, Doc, how you going?
Bit dark over there.
You're muted. You can unmute yourself easily. You'll need to unmute. Yes, hang on. We've got a chat. Oh, okay. So I think it might be the cameraman. I've got to download. Oh dear. Okay. Well, the cameraman app is not saying mute. Just for a moment, I'll see if I can see what I can do here. I'd be a lot faster, Doc. The only problem is that I'm an idiot. Muted is grayed out. I can't actually can't get to it.
Could try sign language, but I don't know if we can see it.
Okay. Look, here's a suggestion, Doc. If you could, I'll just put in the chat the link back to here. If I put that there, if you could exit and come in again, and let's see what happens. I've changed the camera so that it don't. Just before you go, I'll just check the cameraman settings to make sure it doesn't do that. So no. Okay, so it shouldn't mute you when you come in now.
We've got another question in another language. And yeah, this one's
from
Oleg Kreuter.
Yeah, I'll select the question. There's Doc now.
There we go.
That's better.
Hi.
How are you, mate?
Hi, Doc.
Can you hear me?
Yes, mate, you're looking well.
Hey. Well, Jim, you baited me with your post. I was cruising through G Plus and I saw your post. Oh, I got to jump on this. I scrolled down to the bottom. I said, "Ooh, Hangout at my time of night. This is great." I'm a night owl.
What time is it there?
It's about just almost midnight.
Oh, not too bad.
Mm.
I'm in Mexico, but Pacific time.
It was only a gentle bait, though, Doc, wasn't it? I mean, you know, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's just I was one of those that kind of went off on TechCrunch for some very irresponsible reporting, which shouldn't have come as a great shock, I suppose, knowing TechCrunch. But even for them, it wasn't exactly stellar. But I disagree with you, basically. Yeah. I don't think that, first of all, the premise that because Vic is gone, that G Plus is probably going to die on the vine, I think is totally off the wall, because an organization like Google, they're pretty bright lads. They certainly know how to build into the organization ways to overcome personnel attrition, even at those levels. And on top of that, Besbris was around since the beginning, and according to Vic, did a lot of the structural work on G+. So, I don't think that's any reason to think it's going to go away. I do feel like it's probable that there's going to be a little bit less focus on it. Vic had a lot of horsepower. He had a lot of stroke internally. I don't know if Besbris does or not. So, there's a lot of politics in Mountain View, and you got to have some stroke to get things done when you hit resistance, and I don't know if Besbris is going to have it or not, to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Time will tell. But, they've been doing quite a bit. They supposedly have some things that are just about ready to roll out. There's some more improvements and additions. So I'm optimistic, I guess. I don't see enough evidence at this point to believe that there's any reason, any reasonable cause to think that it's going to go away.
Could it be at the state? Go ahead, Jim.
No, you go ahead.
I was just thinking, could Google Plus be at the state where it's had its big push that it needs to get the features in there and get everything up and running, so that as Google Plus itself, it doesn't need so much development work. It's got its fingers in all these pies. So those developers are working on the secondary stuff like Hangouts and things like that. They're moving away from the central bit. So it's not that the platform's going to go away. It's just the area of development is moving around. They're picking on a new place to work on.
Well, there could be some validity in that for sure, because first of all, I never saw Google Plus as intended to be a social platform anyway. Initially when it first rolled out, everybody was talking about, is this going to be the Facebook killer? I don't think it was ever intended to be a social platform. I think it was intended to masquerade as a social platform in order to act as an information harvesting platform. And I think there were some reasons behind that more than just getting them more data for better ad targeting. I think that basically it is a perfect platform. They build algorithms, these learning algorithms and their sorting algorithms, they have to test them. And they have to have some way of testing them because they just can't operate the scales that they function at with manual intervention. Human intervention has to be kept to a very minute percentage of their activity. So let's say you build a platform, let's say you're talking about authorship, okay? You build a platform like Google Plus where you get people to set up authorship on their sites, and you can see all of a sudden all of their connections to their different pieces of work they've published on other blogs and on periodicals and their own sites, and you get their social media accounts. And at the same time, you're running your algorithm is trying to find those connections. Now you've got a verified database you can check their algorithm's findings against to verify them. And I think that was probably the biggest thing that they got out of it. Once they get those algorithms fine-tuned to the point that they can have confidence in them, then I think it's entirely possible, Tony, that you're right, that they don't any longer need the platform to provide the data because their algorithms are now reliable enough to get the data themselves. So that is a possibility.
Well, I think the platform will stay, but it doesn't have to go develop as fast as in the past. But that's a good point. Like they're getting all this demographic data now. It's not just it's useful for AdWords. We can pull it into analytics now, and they can use it to verify algorithms and things. All this extra information should you pile it all together in their neural networks, and it might come up with better algorithms.
Yeah. And especially I think that learning algorithms take a tremendous amount of processing time. Not to say time, I should say cycles. Maybe a function of time, maybe a function of computing power, but it takes a lot of machine cycles. And anytime you have a database, even if it's a partial database, which obviously the people that are on Google Plus are not a majority of the people on the internet. We're a relatively small slice. But once that database is large enough for decent sampling, which I think it's long since gotten to that point, you can start running your learning algorithms against it as well and fine-tuning those. So, I say I disagree with you, Jim. At this point I disagree, but I won't discount the possibility. I do think that Tony may be onto it. They're not going to shut it down. There's just no way that they would want to shut it down. But I could see it demanding fewer resources and getting less attention.
Yeah, and also I'm not expecting it to close in 1 year or 2 years or whatever. I just don't think that. I mean, consider that Larry Page stood in front of a meeting of Googlers and said to the engineers, "Google is Google Plus." I don't know what words follow that, but it was something along the lines of, you've got to get on board or leave Google. So imagine what has transpired inside the Googleplex from that point, almost 3 years ago, to today, when he hasn't used Google Plus to speak to the users. I mean, it would have been a golden opportunity for either Larry Page or Dave Besbris to speak to the users, man to man. That's probably I'm showing my age here. I don't mean man to man. I mean person to person. and a golden opportunity to quell the rumours, reassure the troops, stop the horses from bolting, but it just wasn't taken. That's why it's made me feel that the days of what we envisage for Google Plus, the direction which it was heading, that journey that it was on, I don't think we're ever going to get to that end point that we expected to get to. I mean, things like Hangouts, like the elements of Google Plus, the image treatment, the sharing of images, and so on. They will continue because they're mainstream. But the communication, the debate facility, the learning facility of Google Plus, I don't think that's going to have the same priority going forward.
Well, I think priority is probably a very good choice of words, Jim. I could see the priorities getting deprecated, because I think that it has accomplished the majority of the immediate benefits they hope to get out of it. So,
yeah, exactly.
These things like YouTube, they're doing some things right now that I think that they're probably going to be able to index video, the content within a video within the next year or two, okay? So they're not going to give that YouTube tie up. And I don't think that YouTube, the growth that it has seen since G Plus has been tremendous. I don't think YouTube would sustain any appreciable level of growth without the G Plus tie-in at this point. There'll always be people that'll throw up a video, but if they're getting 1,000 videos per hour put up now, they would probably drop down to 100 or less. So I don't think they want to give that up because, again, they'll have those learning algorithms that'll be trying to teach themselves how to reliably index video content. And I think that we're going to end up having a chance to have input on that. We've indexed your video, Jim. Here's a transcript. Does this look accurate to you? Any corrections to it? That sort of thing.
Yeah, you broke up there, but I think what you said was that they would say, here's a transcript.
Yeah, and let you verify it, possibly even edit it, just to see, spot checking to see if their indexing algo is doing its job right.
Oh yeah,
they made it
wouldn't that be a marvelous thing? Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. It would be marvelous. I don't know if they would ever allow that or not, but again, knowing that human intervention is really shied away from as much as possible, simply because of the scale they're operating at. They can't afford to climb down that rabbit hole, So I would see us possibly being given a few people, kind of like when they first, invite only, a pilot program, inviting a few people just to get some spot checks on the algos. And that's, there's a lot of supposition there, but isn't that what SEO is all about, basically? Supposition and conjecture.
My camera, for some reason or other, stopped working the moment we started this broadcast. But if it was working, you'd see me nodding my head.
Figured. I had an interview last week, set up early in the morning, and I had to get up and got up early and had my coffee and got dressed and got in front of my camera and booted my computer, and it wouldn't. The graphics card died, took out the power supply, and I had about 40 minutes to get the thing fixed and made it with about 5 minutes to spare. Because the things always go Murphy's Law, the least opportune time.
I was just about to buy myself a Surface Pro. Microsoft really pushed to get rid of the Surface Pro 1s that brought in this just crazy pricing, and we couldn't get enough stock. Our clients were just picking them up. We were putting out just so many of them. And anyway, I said to Angie the other day, look, I said I think I'll have one of those Surface Pros, and the pricing's all gone. I missed the rush.
Oh.
Microsoft has stopped that competitive pricing because they've sold so many of them. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah, I want a Surface Pro. Actually, that's something I was thinking of. The Nokia phone, the Windows phone. So much of YouTube and so much of Google Plus's current growth has come from mobile. And I mean, a big thing is, that Google Plus is basically it's part of Android. You can't get away from Google Plus on an Android phone. It's already there. The plumbing's already there. What's going to happen once the Windows phone, and I firmly believe it will, starts taking big chunks of Android's market away? Or probably Apple's market is probably the first one they'll take big chunks of.
Yeah, I would think that, of course, some of your Apple users are just hardcore, and if they double the price, they'd still buy a Mac. But I do think that pricing will be an issue. Microsoft is well positioned to kick Apple's butt on pricing, and they've shown that they're willing to. So, in terms of market share, boy, when you start talking about going after Google and having any real results and hurting them, that's almost science fiction anymore. I just don't know.
I think that's what Microsoft intends to do.
It would be refreshing to see. I would like to see more competition in search and in mobile, particularly in mobile, where we're headed right now. I would love to see more competition. I think that's going to be good for everybody. But boy, Google has just gotten so powerful that it's like an ant crawling up an elephant's leg with rape on his mind,
Well, I mean, the new Windows Phone, it has, and the Microsoft apps, they have search built into them. You won't need to go to your browser to search. You'll search off the desktop. You'll search off the phone. You'll search off the app. I think that's going to have an impact because I've seen some of the models. The boys have bought a couple of them, and they're great phones. And the technical excellence of them, they've out-appled Apple.
I would love to that. Good. I'm sorry you broke up, Jim.
You broke up, mate. Try again.
You're breaking up too a little bit.
Break up.
I heard you mention Apple. I think we're losing the connection a little bit here.
Yeah.
Which may be my ISP. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Matsutake, that question you put in the chat, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, as far as I know, there is no Google Plus native app for Windows phones.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which is a downside for Google, isn't it? Because the other social medias are across all phones. Twitter, Facebook, they can be anywhere. Mm-hmm. Whereas Google Plus is Android. It controls it well, but they can't get very much across on the other phones, and the phones are going to be the future. People are.
Yeah, they haven't developed one. I mean, as far as I know, they have not shown any interest in developing one. So if you're a Windows phone and you want to use Google Plus, then you have to use the mobile version, which is not necessarily great.
Do iPhones have Google Plus?
Yeah, iPhones, there's native iPhone app for Google Plus, but not for Windows phones.
Have you heard of Link? LYNC, Link?
No. Yeah.
It's something which will operate on phones, tablets, PCs. It's got text chat. It's got voice chat. It's got video chat. It's got conference chat. It's got shared PowerPoint, shared whiteboard, shared poll, shared Q&A. I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to try and bypass Google Plus.
And Skype's just brought out their own Hangout competitor, haven't they?
Yeah, multi-person, yeah.
And they've had that for a while. It was a premium function.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work badly. It's the beauty of G Plus is the YouTube tie. When you can do a Hangout like this and have it immediately automatically transposed over to a video, that's gold, because it takes time to do this and edit it yourself and compile it into an MP4. So that's helped a lot with the adoption. Unfortunately, that's no benefit of Skype, and I don't think that's ever likely to be.
And that's the thing. I mean, in my opinion, is that Google Plus needs to play to the strengths that Google has, and which cannot be replicated so easily, or that there is a viable competitor that can be purchased by its competitor. YouTube is a good example, I think, because not only is the technology there, but it's the content. There's a huge amount of content on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that you cannot replicate. You might be able to replicate the technological side of things, having the ability to upload videos and so on and so forth. But, you cannot suddenly create that amount of content from ether. So that's one issue, I think. So in a sense that concentrating on photos and things like that, great. But then there are viable competitors, and the processes can be replicated. The two areas that I personally see are YouTube and maps, local stroke maps. Those are two areas that Google is extremely strong, and there aren't that many competitors.
Another area that they're very strong, Masataki, that they're not paying a lot of attention to now is Google Earth. And there's a lot of interest around Google Earth, and I think that there's potentially new things they can do with that satellite capability that they're not doing yet.
Yeah.
I could see that being married in a much more functional package to their maps and navigation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if they're working on it, they're keeping it very close to the vest. But that's another area that who else could keep them on that?
Yeah.
Aside from NSA, nobody.
No, and I think that's the thing and then Google Plus has to create a need for it. I mean, you might have the most fantastic product out there in terms of function and so on and so forth compared to other offerings. But if you cannot create a need for it, not just sort of, it's nice, here it is, you can use it. But unless people can identify a need to use that particular product, then I think it's always going to be, it's always going to be perceived to be struggling.
Well, I don't know that that's an insurmountable problem, though. I mean, really, if you look at a lot of the major technological advances in the Western world over the last 2 centuries, the vast majority of them, there was no need for them. until some savvy marketers made people believe that they needed to have it.
Yeah.
Even though they've done
Exactly.
quite well without it for generations, all of a sudden it became tantamount to a necessity. So
Exactly. So it's packaging, isn't it? So how do you make that
doing a
whole
lot of
package necessary?
well, I don't know. I don't have that answer. But for instance, look at what they're doing with their self-driving cars. And they're having unprecedented good fortune with the way that their testing and development has gone. And in the states that are allowing them on the road, they haven't had any catastrophes. I mean, they're having a better track record than car manufacturers are having with their recalls. So there's a possibility there to tie it into the vehicle market of 2 or 3 decades down the road. And I do think that Google is in this for the long haul. They're not on a survival path. They're not thinking in terms of what can we do in between 2015 and 2020. They're thinking about where they're going to be in 2050, 2060. Now, whether their dreams will come true remains to be seen, but I believe that that's where their planning is pointed, is 20, 30 years down the road. So, they're putting so much work into artificial intelligence, into robotics, into areas that have so many applications that while they're not necessities today, they could easily be, the perception could be created that they became a necessity very easily.
Just like I guess mobile phones now. I think it's is it a human right now to have a phone or something?
Oh, yeah. I mean, how many 10-year-old kids don't have a smartphone?
But that took time to come in, and I think part of Google's approach is to kind of sneak things in instead of creating one necessity. There's lots of little ones that different people like, from say Google Now. So, some people probably just can't live without that now. The YouTube people who want to do the comments, they're all getting pulled in on their little individual need. And the idea is to pull people into that one network from their own little world. And over time, slowly everybody suddenly realized they need it.
Yep. Some of it's keeping up with the Joneses, and some of it's just a matter of being able to be connected. I'm very much intrigued by what, I think I've still got another decade or two left in me. I'd like to see where we're going to get with vehicles over the next 10 to 20 years, because I think that your car is going to have a voice-actuated computer, and you're going to be able to do a search and get all sorts of directions verbally from your car while it's driving you to work. You know, and none of this is technology none of it's science fiction. It all exists. It just hasn't been packaged and presented and marketed yet as a whole package. But I think that it's imminent, and I think that
I
that's
think
one of the
you're right.
areas. I think that's one of the areas that Google intends to lead.
Yeah. Well, my son's Volkswagen is a self-drive in that he can drive down the highway, and for a short period he can leave the steering wheel, and it'll drive and follow the lanes around the corner or whatever, just for a
Really?
short period.
I
Yeah,
didn't
really.
know. I didn't know Volkswagen was doing that. Huh.
Yeah. And Um, yeah, I drove it myself. I went to the airport to pick him up in it the other day, and just amazing, the development of cars these days.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out. I wasn't aware that they were doing that.
Yeah. I'll try and think of the model.
Is that on restricted roads with certain markings, or
no, it's just driving up the highway. You just engage it, and it follows the white lines either side of the lane. If something is in front of it, it'll brake automatically. You can just leave it on cruise control, and it'll just turn around a corner.
Well, of course,
it won't do it permanently, though. You can only do it for a very brief time. I don't know how long it is.
Well, of course, they've got, I think it was it BMW or Mercedes-Benz? I think it was BMW that first came out with the car that would parallel park itself, which was rather remarkable, too.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe these features are going to slowly creep into mainstream cars. And would it be that Google's doing it to get the patents and the money out of it that way?
Google's doing it to. I mean, people are driving to work. Commute time is a huge amount of time that people spend. If Google can drive the car. Hello, Paul Snedden. How are you, mate?
I'm driving. I thought I'd pop in.
Yeah.
What's happening?
We're discussing social media, Paul. Actually, it's fortuitous that you jumped on, being Australia's foremost social media person.
I'm far from it, but thank you.
So, Paul, do you have a self-drive car there? We were talking about self-drive cars.
I'd love to have one, actually. I'm a lazy bastard when it comes down to it. But they definitely look interesting. Hopefully you can see me, because I can't tell if you can see me or not, because it is obviously sunset, and it's getting a little bit dark.
No, we can see you.
Oh, very good.
We can also see what you had for lunch.
If it gets too noisy with background noise and whatnot, just feel free to mute me, because I just wanted to listen in to what you were talking about.
Okay, I'll mute it and we'll go on, because I don't know how long Masataki and Doc have got. You guys know how to mute? I'm not too familiar with that. Oh, hang on, found it. There we are. You're muted now, Paul, but feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay.
That didn't work.
Okay, I was going to say, I don't know how to unmute on my phone.
Perfect, Paul. Is it legal in Australia to do it? I think so, Masataki. I'm not sure. I don't think they'd be allowed to sell cars if it wasn't with that feature. If it wasn't legal.
So long as you're in control of the vehicle, you're fine. Is that if you have two hands on your wheel, then it's fine.
Yeah, look, I think it's just it's a feature that you can't use for long, but it would give you enough time to pick up a dropped item or something like that. You know, I'm not going to say send a text message, but it would give you time to grab something out of the glove box, for argument's sake.
For instance, I read recently that Colorado has allowed self-driving cars on one major interstate highway going through the state, with the stipulation that you have to sign up for it, and the stipulation is there that you, as the driver of the car, it has to be a licensed driver in a position in the vehicle to take control within seconds, and that licensed driver is responsible for the car. So if the car speeds, the driver gets the ticket. If the car wrecks, the driver is liable. Which it just makes sense. But there are increasingly more states. California has allowed Google access throughout the state now for their driving tests, and they are already in front of the state legislature with a bill to approve them for sale. Okay, whether that's going to go through remains to be seen. How much resistance they may hit, but even the land of fruits and nuts is ready to consider it. So.
Mm. But yeah, getting back to what I was saying before, Tony. I mean, Google wants to have self-driving cars because all of this commute time could be translated into computing time, where people would be exposed to more ads.
I was just thinking, yeah, if you're hands-free, they'll have to change the laws again to allow you to Twitter while you're driving, as long as the car's driving for you.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind then, right now in California, well, with the exception of some metropolitan areas, you can use a cell phone only if it's hands-free. Okay? And texting or anything like that is absolutely forbidden under all conditions. Well, how far are they away from being? I mean, you can already with Siri, you can basically search by oral commands. So why would they not continue that development? You could tweet.
You're unmuted again, Paul.
Yes, I know.
So you could theoretically you could tweet verbally. Just somebody just needs to develop the app.
I think Australia is stricter. I think you're not even allowed to touch your phone, even if it's hands-free and mounted. So, for example, on my phone, I can use the radio to control the phone, but I can't use the phone to control the phone.
Doesn't make much sense, does it?
And you can do it by voice. In a way, because a touch screen is not very intuitive in a car. Not when it's a little phone mounted. You're kind of going. Whereas the radios, you've got tactile buttons, so you don't have to look at it to control it. So there's a kind of bit of sense there, but I think they're just being a bit over strict. And definitely you can't actually hold the phone while you're talking.
So what happens if the phone is actually your satellite navigation system?
Yeah, exactly.
So you just got to look around before you do your next navigation.
Yeah, there's going to have to be a lot of legislation modified and generated to handle the technological advances because, I mean, like for instance, it's funny, in California you cannot touch your cell phone, basically. They don't say you can't touch it, but you can't talk on it. You certainly can't text on it, so why would you want to touch it? Yet, you can have a little 5-inch screen embedded in your dash with a GPS system navigating you throughout town, and that's perfectly all right. And those are touch screens sometimes as well. So there's a lot of things, a lot of afterthought, and things are progressing so fast. I guess some afterthought is to be expected, but unfortunately, what happens is some kid's going to get pancaked because he was using his GPS, and it's going to make a big fill through too fast without proper consideration. That's going to be too limiting, and it'll take 10 years to adjust it, which is what normally happens.
So back to social media.
Okay. All right. Pick an aspect and go ahead.
One of the posts I put up was about copyright, and I went to a social media meetup this week, all about copyright. And what I found interesting is whatever you post on the internet you own, copyright-wise, apart from some exceptions like if you're an employee and the company owns it. So basically what the social media companies are doing in their disclaimers are they're giving themselves right to share your content, and they're also saying that if that content causes anybody to sue them, they can instantly sue you.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you steal content, it's going to come back to you on that. But you still actually do own everything you've got. It's just you've given, say, Facebook the right to reshare it. But even with that, it seems that any sort of sharing online is technically infringement of copyright, no matter what people say, unless someone gives actual permission. And so what I found was interesting was that journalists do this a lot. They'll take people's content, photos, and reuse it. And all the time they're taking a bit of a risk. And unless they've managed to contact the person who owns the content, they are taking a risk of being sued. And they're probably the ones have to be the most careful, because a journalist might make millions of dollars out of a photo, so they're worth suing. For the average Joe, we're just not worth suing. So I found that quite interesting on the whole. That I think the other day someone said something about if you posted on Twitter, you've automatically given away your rights, but it's not true. You still own everything.
No. No, I mean, if it's something shared within the same platform, then you have given consent for that. So you're the right. So it's the is a non-exclusive right, basically forever, for the platform for things to be shared within the platform. So if you post something on Facebook, and if it's shared by someone on Facebook, then that's fine, because that's part of the thing that you've agreed to. The question, I think the problem arises, as far as I know, if someone shares the thing that you have posted that might have been shared on Facebook on another place, another platform, then I think it is copyright infringement.
Which happens a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, you got fair use, which is so highly subjective. From on a case-by-case basis, fair use is the crutch that a lot of people, including journalists, use, as long as they're just excerpting. But boy, that's walking the fine line sometimes too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, but I mean, on whom does the burden of proof fall? And I think if you are arguing for fair use, you have to establish that it is indeed fair use. And that, I don't know where the bar is set, but yeah, I mean, people often claim that with regard to terminated AdSense accounts. I see that quite often in the AdSense forums. I have had my AdSense account terminated, and you look at the blog or the site and they say, look, you've been copying things from other sources, and that's copyright infringement, you can't do that. And they'll say, but it's fair use. No.
That's what everybody claims, but everybody except the original copyright owner, of course.
Yeah.
But it's down to the original guy to decide to try and dispute it, and I think that's where most people are getting away with it. That's why it's all over the internet. And the other thing is, if it's me, nobody's going to try and sue me. It's going to cost them more money than they can get out of me.
Yeah, exactly. But a similar thing applies to slander, libel, and other such. If you libel someone on Twitter, that has happened a few times in this country. People have been sued successfully for what they posted on Twitter. So, you have to. It is a formal publication. It is a formal publication that is available to everyone. So, in that sense, it is the same as printing a huge number of copies of something on paper and distributing it everywhere. So people have to be careful about that. I think there's an illusion of intimacy and closed environment in many of the social media platforms, even though people post publicly. And I think it's quite often the case that people don't realize what public means. what if you post something publicly? It does mean posting publicly.
Well, for instance, on Facebook, there was a time when you didn't have to have a Facebook account. You could go to Facebook if you knew the link. You could go and view. You didn't have a line, what do they call it? Then the timeline, but you could go to somebody's account and look at their page and view their timeline. Now you can't, which I suspect was what the legal department at Facebook probably told Mark. We need to close this platform. You can't hold people's feet to the fire for their behavior and what they do with things if they're not required to be a member and have signed into your, bought off on your terms and conditions. So now you have to have an account to see anything within Facebook. Whether that was the primary motivation for that, I don't know, but more than likely it was done to keep Google out of there. But
they got a lot of stick for their privacy issues in the past anyhow, so I guess they have to go way over the other side now to get over that problem.
Well, for my personal feeling is they're still falling shy of reasonable in terms of privacy protection, but then I have a problem with Zuckerberg anyway, so I'm probably prejudiced.
Is that on the side of like advertisers and app people who can access a lot of information?
Honestly, I can't speak much to the Facebook advertising, aside from a few blog posts I've read about it, because I never dabbled in it. But certainly I would expect that is probably a major area because there is information, demographic information available. How privatized it is, I don't know. It may be fairly well anonymous. I had a problem with my only exchange with Zuckerberg was about 5 years ago when people that had private accounts were suddenly finding their phone numbers publicized. And the stance that he took was just like, don't like it, don't use our platform. And that kind of poisoned me against his personality at that point, because that kind of tells a tale about his feelings on it. But it's I think that there was a case, and maybe one of you gents remembers who it was. I don't recall which platform it was, but there was a case recently where somebody did perform a libelous or I don't know if it was libel or some other form of legal claim that was generated against an individual's statements pointed at a particular person. They filed suit, and they also filed suit at the platform. And I don't remember if it was Facebook or Google Plus or Twitter, but anyway, the state Supreme Court here in California overturned the case was dismissed, and they appealed it, and the state Supreme Court overturned the findings of the district court and was supposedly going to allow the case to proceed against the platform because as a publisher they did have responsibility regardless of what their terms. Did anybody remember who that was? Was that Facebook? That was just in the last 3 or 4 months.
No, I don't know, but
I don't know.
It rings a bell.
There was...
I read about it, and I thought, well, this is going to be an interesting case because it's going to have some far-reaching effects if it goes, especially if it goes to the U.S. Federal Supreme Court. But I haven't heard any more about it. I have to dig into my file to see if I can find it. I know I must have kept something on it.
There was, you may be able to argue, a similar case in England where someone sued Blogger as the publisher of libel. And that argument, I think, is now... the case itself was, I think, dismissed, but it is arguable that Blogger becomes the publisher as soon as it had been notified, and in this case, the claimant had sent in letters to Google in London, pointing out, these things have been written on Blogger about me. And the argument was that as soon as Google became aware of this, then it is publisher insofar as the law regarding, I think it'd be libel, is concerned. So I think there is an increasing movement towards that, of not only going after the person who's slandering you, but the platform as well, for allowing that to be published publicly.
Well, to a degree, that's. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Sorry. Go ahead.
To a degree, that seems reasonable. Once I'm made aware of a copyright infringement or a libelous statement, then if I continue to leave that content up, then I think it's reasonable that I've accepted some responsibility for it. So, I don't know if I have a problem with that conceptually. It does set up a very slippery slope, though.
Yeah, I think as a principle, I think that's fine, because that makes sense to me as well. Especially if there are degree of anonymity that you cannot sue the person because you don't know the identity of that person. Sometimes you need to pursue in the courts to force the platform to reveal that identity, or what it knows about that particular person. But yeah,
of course,
I think
the other aspect of that would be you get an injunction. I have a little bit of a problem with the way that they handle copyright infringements. For instance, if I see that you have ripped off my content and put it on your blog, all I have to do is send up a DMCA notice to your host, and they're required to take it down. So they don't have to determine if my claim is valid or not. They have to give you a certain response time, and if you don't satisfy them with hard proof that you own the copyright on it, they take it down. And I feel like that's another slippery slope. The same sort of thing. Why not make me pursue legal avenues and get an injunction against you to make you take it down? If I can prove it, then make me prove it. Because I don't feel like making the hosting service responsible for all the content on every client's site is a reasonable avenue. And this from a guy, I generate a lot of content. I have had to generate DMCA takedown notices against people before. And I still don't feel like it's the fair way to manage it. I don't know if swarming the courts with more claims is really a good solution either, of course.
I think there was another case that was mentioned last week, was someone tried to sue the actual network. So basically the machines hosting the information that had the content, and I believe they failed. So at least that's the kind of precedent that's been put in place, that you can't try and sue anybody who's vaguely involved in the content.
Okay. Can we look at move on to? Oh, hang on. Am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
Okay. Tony, you made a post from an article on social media today, relationship marketing for luxury brands, and you said, I like the term relationship marketing. I think it fits more with the objectives of businesses when doing social media. You guys want to discuss that?
Yeah, basically just the word resonates better with me on that So we were discussing last week, social media is really just the platforms we're doing this on. But businesses are going on there to create relationships. So I think relationship marketing is a better term.
It does have a nice ring to it.
So you heard it here first. Well, actually that post.
Another couple of posts that were made. One was the NYPD going out and asking people to post, which they came unstuck with. And Ronald McDonald, the clown, is being repurposed to jump on social media. Where do you guys see that as heading, or do you see that as a validation that social media is here to stay? It's something that we can't ignore. It's an integral part of SEO, or SEO is an integral part of. No, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
I think, to me, social media is just another channel. And, there's several channels of social available to you, and there's several marketing channels available to you, of which social is one. But it's certainly here to stay for the foreseeable future. I think it's probably going to be going through a lot of evolution, but I don't think it's going to go away. They've embraced being connected, and I don't think that people are going to be willing to give that up readily.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of our clients, like we have a lot of clients that don't necessarily use us for our core functions, but they are, might buy a service from us in some shape or form. But one in particular, it's a like a lifestyle gym, and their entire business is based on Facebook. They schedule events via Facebook. They communicate with their users via Facebook. They don't even have a website of any note, and they don't use their website for communication. It's a business card, but they do have a 2,000 strong Facebook community, which is their user base, and they do that to tell them about what's coming up, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. It's certainly something that can't be ignored. It's a channel which Anne Smarty might even think would be a good idea. Anne Smarty might, rather than blocking Googlebot, she might be better off putting that effort into opening up a Facebook page.
I've heard of doing that. It does not seem to me to be a very sustainable model. And, the problem with that is when you have your own website, you have some control and you own something and you build some equity. And when you have a Facebook page, you don't own anything, you don't have very much control over it, and it could go away.
Yeah.
Mark could suddenly decide that early retirement looks really good this year and just sell it off or break it up or change it so dramatically and start overcharging for ads, start charging for even the presence of a business page, which I don't think that is far off in the future, to tell you the truth. You have to buy the right to put up a business page. So, I understand that. I can see it being an adjunct to a website, but not a replacement for.
I agree. I think that's too risky. It's putting all your eggs in one basket. And there have been cases that I've heard, and people from whom I trust, and essentially someone complained about a possible trademark infringement. They're operating in three totally different markets, and then whoosh, the Facebook presence went. Because someone made a claim to Facebook about trademark infringement. and the whole entire Facebook presence, the business presence went.
That hurts.
So you do need to have presence. That's
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think you should not, like, if he's doing it and it's successful, so you want to keep it up, but you do want to make sure that you pull them into something more permanent, subscriptions or something like that. To if that happens, you've still got something left.
Well, say we'd based a business on Google Reader, and we had meetings via Google Reader, and we communicated we shared information via Google Reader, and then somebody decided that Google Reader was going to go away. Imagine what could happen then. Oh wait, it did.
I'd love to see the faces of the guys at Feedly when that happened. They were probably just going, "Where?"
So the point I was trying to make with that though was that say Google decides, because Larry Page doesn't run Google anymore, does he, Doc? Goldman Sachs runs Google. The board runs Google, and Goldman Sachs runs the board. Is that a fair comment?
Pretty much. That's pretty close to true.
Yeah. And above the engineers, there's this management layer. And there's a lot of Goldman Sachs alumni, ex-Goldman Sachs employees there. They don't care about the relationships we've built up on Google+. They won't care if at some point someone's going to say this is not making us any money, or this isn't this isn't valuable to us. There were many Googlers that were very upset that Google Reader went away, but it still went away, and that's what I'm thinking might eventually happen to Google+, because they've got what they need. They've got the social graph. They've got all our information. They know who we are. We've got a number, so the fact that we're posting our lunch, that doesn't add any more value to the information they have already have on us, or we post our son's graduation or something like that. That doesn't add any more value. So they don't really need Google Plus anymore. Google Plus has given them the demographics that they were looking for. From this point on, they're providing this service, which must be an engineering nightmare and a huge expense to continue to provide this service. At some point, will somebody from Goldman Sachs say no more?
Well, it's certainly not inconceivable. I'm sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Then they'll start moving Google Places back into Google Places, and we'll have another nightmare again.
Oh, God. I can't wait.
Please.
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to...
Okay, Doc. But by the way, Doc, I have to tell you that last segment was just me trying to justify my baiting you into coming to see us.
Well, I'm glad it worked.
Doc, we'd consider it an honour if you'd join us as often as you wish. I'll put you on the permanent invitation list, which you can ignore as often as you want, but pop in when it suits you.
Great, I appreciate it. Well, thank you for the invite, and I'm going to go hit the pillow and contemplate my future.
Uh-huh.
My next 7 or 8
Same with
hours at least.
Also,
Good night, everybody.
would you mind, Doc, if I also put you on the Dumb SEO questions invitation list?
Please.
Excellent, fantastic.
That's one I've intended to try to hit several times, and I just never quite pulled free in time to do it. But yeah, please do add me.
Yep, no problem. They'll just come
Everybody
every
have a
week.
great day.
Thank you, Doc.
See you, Doc.
Good night.
So,
But that's a little bit of the problem with Google Plus. It's Google. If it's the core business, then investors will be interested in how many signups there are, etc.
yeah, I mean, in a sense, you have to tell different stories to different people. So, the story you tell to your investors is going to be different from the story you tell to your users.
But what happens if the numbers stagnate or even start to diminish? Just say, take an imaginary scenario where Microsoft becomes ascendant in mobile, in apps. I mean, they already own the office space. But they've now just gone out and made all of these Office apps virtually free. In fact, free if the device is small enough. Say Office 365, it comes with 4 copies of Office. So the employee has a copy of Office to use at work, copy of Office to use on his phone, his Windows phone, a copy of Office, excuse me, to use on his tablet in front of the telly, and another one, for his home computer. So I mean, that's going to make significant change in the marketplace. They're really aggressive right now. It's going to make a lot of things move. And what if it does impact Google Plus numbers and they start to diminish? And the scenario could be that more people are using Windows Phone, less people are using iPhone and Android, so therefore there are less people feeding into Google Plus.
Yeah, okay, so the first thing they would do is to develop a Windows Phone app, native app. But let's say they don't, and let's say the numbers stagnate and even diminish. The question is, I suppose, the value proposition in that what value does Google Plus bring to Google? And I think we've discussed it quite extensively. And it's about, it's not only about what people post or what people share, but it's also about what people plus one and reshare. Sort of the interaction and what kind of groups like things. So if you are particular demographics, sort of gender, age, location, and you have joined certain amount of you share hobbies, then what kind of things do you share? What kind of things do you do? What are your activities? Behavior, activities, things like that. I think then, as long as there's a substantial number, which may not need to be that large, but enough to make a viable sample, then I think it would be interesting for Google to maintain that, because it's a great source of information, the social graph, as it were.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't see Google adapting well to the change. We've got this issue with the YouTube app for the Nokia phone, where supposedly because the YouTube app offered the ability to save a copy offline, and also perish the thought, skip the ads by default. It doesn't work. They've blocked it. So, and there's no time frame to replace it. So I can't see Google adapting well. I can't see them running out and building a Google Plus app for Windows Phone.
I think the argument has always been the market's too small, but it'd be interesting to know. We'll in the famous words of Rob Mars, we shall see.
We'll see. We'll see. Hmm. Hmm.
Else. There was another post which was about now what was the exact terms? It was about would you plus one something that's risky because your name's on it. So Google's whole approach is that you've got to use your name. So is this causing a bit of a conflict on how much you dare share?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think plus one buttons are difficult because plus one indicates a positive sentiment, right? Whatever that exact sentiment you may have, it is a positive thing. So you're putting your name to it, and it's public. And to Google's credit, it has always maintained that plus oneing something is a public act, and it's it may not be easily visible at the moment, but it is a public action, so you need to be aware of that. I think Google has been quite clear on that, to its credit. But yeah, I think that's a good point because your opinions might change, your lifestyle might change. You may plus one something now. 3 years down the road, you might look back and think, why did I endorse that? Why did I, express a positive sentiment towards this thing? So it's going to be an interesting question. In a sense, if you plus one lots of things, then you're going to have things that are probably not going to be particularly good or interesting down the road. But if you are selective about it, I suppose the weight of individual plus one's much larger in that respect. So yeah, I mean, it's extremely interesting. I tend not to plus one things outside of the Google Plus landscape. I plus one a lot of comments, posts, images on Google Plus, but I rarely plus one things on external sites.
So the other interesting angle is when someone makes a post and it's actually a sad or negative post, but you like the fact that they made the post. So you kind of plus one going, well, kind of a bit weird to say thumbs up to your grandma dying or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's certainly an issue.
It's always an awkward one. The other one I thought of is especially when if you're doing a vote on, say, a website, there is the chance that the content of that page you plus one gets changed. Yeah. So a kind of bait and switch can happen where someone might get loads of plus ones for some great content and then switch it in for something that they want to make look popular. And at the same time, your vote is suddenly going on to something you didn't really vote for. That's
I suppose, part of the reason I tend to plus one things within Google Plus. Not that people can't change their posts, but
Well, I saw the reason that came to mind was on one of these Q&A websites, and I bookmarked a question, went back to it later, and I'd put an answer on it, but they changed the question. And so I was like, eventually I worked out from other people's answers that's what they'd done. They'd just gone, didn't like the question, I'll ask a different one on the same post. So, and even in Google Plus, you can do that. You can edit your posts. So there's a risk there, but I wouldn't imagine most people doing that.
Well, even within Google Plus, I think that the plus ones can be a problem. if they make it public, like Facebook did with their graph search, people unliked a lot of pages when they launched graph search.
Plus ones are public, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
They're public, but not always visible.
Yeah, you've got the choice, and they're quite hard to find in your own history. Oh, there it is, yeah. So you get the choice of making it visible.
But you cannot search it, I think. Can you?
No. And as website owner, you don't know if you +1 your content. So.
No, but you can, if it's searches, you can see which friends +1 content.
Yeah,
So
but that's your social connections. You don't, if you don't have any connection with the person who +1 your thing, then that person's not going to appear. It's just going to appear as a number.
There's no tools to reverse engineer that?
Not that I'm aware of.
I think we've covered all the posts this week.
All right. Well, we go back to the post that I made. What are your thoughts on that? I promise you, it wasn't tongue in cheek. I mean, I'm not saying it's the sky is falling. I see it as a long-term thing. But what are your thoughts? Enough of all this talk about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think about me?
I'm confused.
No thoughts on that?
Which post is this? The one you did as the link bait?
Oh, well, look, some might call it link bait.
Just trying to find.
I think Randy Wilson Brown, or whatever he's calling himself now, I think he'd have to say, I think he'd have to tip his hat to that one. And he is a good link baiter.
So what's the TLDR version of it?
Oh well, let me have a look and see for myself.
You've forgotten.
All right, I confess that I did write it to generate some interest in what we're doing here. Since Doc was kind enough to come along and participate, I consider the time well spent.
Someone asked a question in Russian. Can they ask a question? I eventually translated it. They're probably gone by now. So, yes, you can ask a question.
If they could use Google Translate, it would help us. Oh, that was Oleg. Yeah, no, Oleg answered asked that question before Doc joined us, actually.
Yeah.
So I'll mark that one as done. We have 2 viewers. Wow. Thank you very much. We ran out of puff, guys.
Covered all I know.
All right, let's wind up. Thank you very much to the person that's still watching us. You know, that you would take the time and trouble to listen to what we have to say makes what we're doing here worthwhile. We'll be back at the same time next week, and thank you, Edwin, Masataki, and Tony, and Doc, who has gone, and also Paul Snedden for calling in. I did actually speak with Clint Fudge. He's unfortunately got visitors at home, so he couldn't join us. But maybe next week we'll try to get him along again, because I think he's a gold medalist in small business participation on social media. He's certainly doing it to perfection, and achieving. One, he's having fun, but two, he's I'm sure enlisted a lot of clients. I'd like to know how many of his clients have actually stemmed from relationships formed on Google+. Okay, if there's nothing more, I'll terminate the broadcast.
Nope.